You spent $4.5 billion of our money to buy a $2 billion pipeline under the promise that it would accelerate the expansion of that pipeline. On what date will the construction of the pipeline expansion begin?
Well, thanks very much for answering this question. It's clear that we needed to move forward in a way with the Trans Mountain Pipeline and the expansion to ensure the pipeline actually gets done. That was the conclusion we got to in purchasing that pipeline. We are working through a process to make sure that that moves forward in the right way, and as we have more detailed dates, we will certainly be providing them to Canadians.
Point of order, Mr. Chair. I'm just not sure where I saw that in the budget implementation bill or the main estimates. I think we're off topic here.
When we go into the estimates, it opens it up. I've provided leeway the first time that the first series of questions were on BIA 1, but I think you can fall back on the estimates, so we'll allow them general questions as a result. Mr. Poilievre.
On what date will construction begin?
As you may know, having been sitting in the House, we're going through a National Energy Board process and seek to have meaningful consultations with Indigenous peoples. The notion of having meaningful engagement and going through that process means that we need to...
So the question was what date? Do you know the date?
I'm happy to respond to the question in a reasonable way if you'd like to hear the answer.
Again, I had a 5-second question that required a 1-second answer. You still haven't answered it. The question is, on what date will construction begin on the project?
If you're not interested in knowing, then that's okay.
I am.
What we're doing is we're going through a National Energy Board process in order to ensure that we deal with the issues brought forth by the Federal Court of Appeal. Specifically, there were issues brought forth around whether the consideration of the West Coast issues around Species at Risk
Act was dealt with. The Minister doesn't appear to have an answer to that question, Mr. Chair, and he's now spoken much longer than my question. So I'll move on to my next question then.
But I'm going to say here, Mr. Poilievre, we can get down to 5-second questions and so on. I see the purpose of a hearing is to get the best legitimate answers you can get, and let's try and proceed in that way.
And that's what I'm doing. We're not getting any answers so far.
So the floor is yours. Go ahead.
So the next question, I've been asked. This minister promised the construction would start in time for the last construction season. We're almost into winter time now, and there's still no construction. So for the last time, when will construction begin on this project? On what date?
I was walking through the process that we were going through with the National Energy Board, and then was going to talk about the importance of having meaningful engagement with Indigenous peoples, both things that the Federal Court of Appeal asked us to do. We're working on those, and we are aiming to have those processes proceed in a way that will ensure that we meet up to the court's direction, and at that stage we'll have more information.
So you have indicated we're going to have to spend more tax dollars to actually build the expansion. How much more will the expansion cost taxpayers? How much? The
current process, of course, is the enabling process to get to the expansion. So as we get there, we'll have more information on the exact numbers.
You don't know?
We did extensive
Do you
review.
know?
The minister is answering the question. Go ahead,
It doesn't look like it to me, but go ahead.
We did extensive review of the both operating costs and the costs for the building of the pipeline expansion in order to get to the appropriate purchase price.
Okay, so you did extensive review. Thank you for sharing that. And what did that review show the construction would cost?
The review showed, of course, that the construction costs that had been previously outlined by the pipeline proponent were entirely reasonable from the standpoint of any price that we would pay, and that this was an economic project from Canadian taxpayers' standpoint.
You put $4.5 billion on the line to nationalize a pipeline, and you can't even tell us how much more Canadian tax dollars are going to have to be poured into this project. I would think that you would have calculated this number before putting this amount of Canadian tax money on the line. So I'm going to give you one more chance for Canadians whose money is at stake here to reassure them that you actually did your math before you put their money on the line. How much will the expansion cost Canadian taxpayers? How much?
Minister, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you for the question. In deciding to go forward with this project, we recognized that it was not only economically good for our country, allowing us to get resources to international markets, but also the project itself was economically feasible. We took a look at the current pipeline dynamics, of course, the economics to get to the price, and also the projected cost of the pipeline development. As we move through the process and get to the next iteration of the development costs, we'll be transparent about those with Canadians.
Thank you.